Statements will be read by Assistant Commissioner Taboul and Superintendent Mooker, both of which will also be read in French. Following the statements and comments by Assistant Commissioner Edwards, there will be a question and answer period. Corporal Sangha is available to assist with any questions requiring Punjabi translation. Le commissaire adjoint Taboul et le superintendent Mooker liront tout d'abord des déclarations en anglais, puis en français.
Superintendent Cooper
Following the
will
question
first
and answer
make
period,
declarations
myself
in
and
English,
Assistant Commissioner
followed by
Taboul
French
will be available
statements.
to answer questions in French, while Corporal Sangha will be available to answer in Punjabi. Après la période de questions, la commissaire adjoint Taboul et
After the
moi-même
Q&A
serons à
period,
votre disposition pour
the
répondre
Commissioner
aux questions.
Adjoint Taboul and myself will be
français.
at your disposal to answer questions
I'll now turn
in
the
French.
microphone over to Assistant Commissioner Taboul.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. I am Assistant Commissioner David Taboul, Commander of the Federal Policing Program in the Pacific Region. Bonjour et merci de vous être joint à nous aujourd'hui. Je suis le commissaire adjoint David Taboul.
Hello, and
chef
thank
du
you for
programme de la
being with
police
us
fédérale
today.
de la région du Pacifique.
I'm David
Si
Taboul,
vous avez des questions en français, s'il vous plaît, n'hésitez pas à
Commissioner
les poser.
from the
Today we
Pacific
are here to
Region,
announce significant
Assistant
developments
Commissioner.
about
If you
the
have questions in
investigation
French,
into
don't
the
hesitate.
murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar that took place on June 18th, 2023 in Surrey, BC. Following many months of investigative work by the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team, with close collaboration and assistance from the Federal Policing Program in BC, RCMP National Headquarters, the Surrey RCMP Detachment, and other partner agencies, 3 suspects have been arrested and charged for their alleged involvement in the killing of Mr. Nijjar. Now, with unequivocal commitment to the administration of justice, and with reverence to the upcoming judicial process on this matter, we are not able to make any comments about the nature of the evidence collected by police, nor can we speak about the motive behind the murder of Mr. Nijjar. However, understanding this situation has attracted considerable and very broad public interest, I will say this matter is still very much under active investigation. I will underscore that today's announcements are not a complete account of the investigative work currently underway. There are separate and distinct investigations ongoing into these matters, certainly not limited to the involvement of the people arrested today, and these efforts include investigating connections to the Government of India. The RCMP Federal Policing Program, IHIT, our municipal partner agencies, are responsible for protecting Canadians from the most serious criminal threats posed by domestic and international criminals. Today's enforcement actions demonstrate our relentless commitment and ability to combat the most sophisticated threats and complex criminality facing our nation. Here today we have Assistant Commissioner Brian Edwards, officer in charge of the Surrey RCMP, who will be available with Superintendent Mooker and I to answer any questions you may have at the conclusions of this press briefing. But first, I would like to congratulate the men and women of IHIT for the outstanding dedication and the results achieved. I would also like to thank the RCMP National Security Program, particularly here in BC, for their unparalleled work ethics and dedication to serve our country on the separate investigative efforts underway. And also thank Surrey Detachment for their continued and seamless collaboration and support. The commitment and skills of these investigators are second to none, and I am very proud of their work and their accomplishment. Nous sommes ici pour vous informer de progrès importants dans l'enquête sur le meurtre de M.
So we're here today
Hardeep Singh
to inform you of important
qui a eu lieu le
progress
18 juin
in the
2023
investigation
à Surrey,
regarding
en
the murder
Colombie-Britannique.
of Mr.
À la
Nijjar
suite
that
d'une
took
enquête qui
place
s'est
in
étendue
June
sur de
18th
nombreux
in
mois menée par l'équipe
Surrey,
intégrée d'enquête sur les homicides,
British
avec la
Columbia in
collaboration et
2023.
l'assistance de membres du
After
programme de la police
several
fédérale en
investigations
Colombie-Britannique,
and with the collaboration and
Direction générale de la
assistance of
GRC,
members of the Federal
le
Police
détachement
of
de la
British
GRC de
Columbia,
Surrey
the General
et d'autres
Management of the
organismes
RCMP,
trois
and the
suspects
Surrey
ont été
RCMP
arrêtés.
detachment,
Des
along with
accusations
other
déposées
partners.
contre
Thanks to all this collaboration, 3
implication
suspects
présumée
were
dans le meurtre de
arrested
M.
and
Hardeep Singh.
accusations filed with
en raison de
regards
notre
to
engagement sans
their
équivoque
alleged involvement in the
l'administration de
murder
la
of
justice,
Mr. Richard.
et
So
par
because
respect
of
pour
our
la poursuite
commitment to
judiciaire à venir sur
justice
cette affaire,
and
nous ne
out
sommes
of
pas en
respect
mesure de
for
faire des commentaires sur la nature
the
des preuves
administration
recueillies
of justice
par la police,
regarding
ni de
this
parler du
case,
mobile
we
du
are
meurtre de M.
unfortunately
Nijjar.
not able to comment on
Étant
what
donné que
has
l'affaire a
been
suscité un
uncovered
intérêt
thus far,
considérable de la part du grand public,
or with
peux
regards
vous
to
dire
the
que l'enquête
motives
se poursuit.
behind the
Je tiens à
the
souligner
murder.
que
But
l'annonce
because of the
aujourd'hui ne
interest of the
constitue pas
public,
un
I can
compte
tell you
rendu
the
complet
investigation is
du travail
ongoing,
d'enquête
and today's
couramment en
announcement is not a full
Des enquêtes
summary of
distinctes
the
sont
investigation
actuellement
that
menées
is
sur
in
différents dossiers,
progress.
aspects du
Distinct
dossier, qui ne se
investigations are
limitent
actually
certainement pas
taking
à
place
l'implication des
on
personnes
various
arrêtées aujourd'hui,
aspects of
dont un
the
examen
entire
portant sur
case, and that is
l'implication
not
du
limited to
gouvernement
those
de
who have
l'Inde.
been arrested today.
Le programme de la police
And
fédérale de la
there's
GRC
an
et l'équipe
investigation
intégrée
regarding the involvement
d'enquête sur
of
les
the
homicides,
Indian
nos
government.
organismes municipaux
The
partenaires ont
RCMP,
la responsabilité
along
de
with
protéger la
the
population canadienne contre les
homicide
menaces graves que posent les
squads,
criminels
have the
nationaux et
responsibility of
internationaux.
protecting the Canadian
Les mesures
population
prises
against the
aujourd'hui
threats
démontrent notre
from
engagement et notre
international and
capacité
national
à combattre les
criminals.
menaces criminelles les plus
The measures
sophistiquées
taken
et
today
les plus
show our
complexes auxquelles
commitment
notre
and our
pays fait face.
skills to face the
Le
most
commissaire adjoint Brian Edwards,
sophisticated
officier responsable du
criminality
détachement de
that we
Surrey,
may
en compagnie du
face.
surintendant Mooper
Brian
et moi-même,
Edwards,
seront à votre
who is
disposition pour répondre à
adjunct
toutes les
commissionary,
questions que vous
along
pourriez
with
avoir à la fin de ce
Superintendent
point de
Mooker and
presse.
myself, will be at your disposal with regards to your
Tout d'abord,
questions
je voudrais
after
féliciter les
today's
membres de l'équipe
announcements.
intégrée d'enquête sur les homicides
Firstly,
pour leur
I'd
dévouement
like to
exceptionnel et pour le travail qu'ils ont accompli dans le
congratulate the
cadre de cette
integrated
affaire.
team of the homicide
Je tiens
team
également à
for their
remercier les membres du programme
amazing
de sécurité
devotion and
nationale
all the
de la
work they have
GRC,
done.
en
I also
particulier
want to
ici en
thank the
Colombie-Britannique,
national
pour leur éthique de
security
travail
members of the
inégalée et
RCMP,
leur
especially
dévouement au
here
service de notre
in
pays,
British
dans le
Columbia,
cadre des
for
différentes
their
enquêtes
wonderful work ethics and
ainsi qu'au
their
détachement de la GRC pour sa collaboration et son
commitment to the
soutien
work to do
continu
in this
et sans faille.
country. I also
La
want to thank
détermination et les
other
compétences de ces
RCMP
enquêteurs sont sans
detachments
pareil.
for their
Et je suis très
ongoing
fier de leur
support.
travail
The
et de leur
determination
réalisation.
of these
I will now invite
investigators
Superintendent
is
Mooker, who will
unparalleled,
provide
and
you
I'm
with
very
additional
proud of
details
all they
of
do.
this investigation into the murder of Mr. Nijjar. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Superintendent Mandeep Mooker, and I'm the officer in charge of the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team. On June 18th, 2023, Hardeep Singh Nijjar was fatally shot and killed as he departed Guru Nanak Sikh Gurdwara in Surrey. Shortly thereafter, I was called into conduct of this investigation. Over the past 10 months, I has led an investigation in partnership with internal and external partners to advance this investigation. Through complex investigative techniques and tremendous support from the community, we were able to gather significant evidence that led us to the individuals that were responsible for this homicide. I'm here today to announce that we arrested and charged 3 individuals for first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder in relation to Hardeep Nijjar's homicide. I had investigators, along with Edmonton Police Services, and numerous other RCMP resources, took custody of all 3 of these individuals in Edmonton, Alberta. The following 3 individuals were charged for this homicide. 22-year-old Gurdwara, who's an Indian national, who is residing in Edmonton, Alberta. 22-year-old Kamalpreet Singh, who is an Indian national, who is also residing in Edmonton, Alberta. 28-year-old Gurnpreet Singh, who is also an Indian national, residing in Edmonton, Alberta. We will be disseminating photos of these accused men in hopes of any information in relation to their presence in Surrey during the time of the offense. This investigation does not end here. We are aware that others may have played a role in this homicide, and we remain dedicated to finding and arresting each one of these individuals. At this time, I want to take a moment to recognize and thank CFSUBC, Edmonton Police Service, and Surrey RCMP Detachment for their unwavering dedication from the onset of this investigation. I would also like to thank the Nijjar family, the citizens of Surrey, and the Guru Nanak Sikh Gurdwara executive for their patience and understanding. We understand that the community is going to have a lot of questions. However, at this time, as this process is going through the court process, we may not be able to answer all the questions. In closing, I would like to say how proud I am of the IHIT investigative team, along with the investigative support unit, for their dedication and determination, and to continue this file to find out everyone that was responsible for the murder of Hardeep Nijjar. I'd like to pass on now to Assistant Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone that is here. My comments will be brief. The murder of Mr. Nijjar at the Scott Road Gurdwara was outrageous and it was reprehensible. It had a profound impact on the residents of Surrey, and notwithstanding today the announcing of charges, those scars will remain in our community for some time. However, I want to share this, that from day one, this community came forward to work with and alongside the police in advancing this investigation. Critically important was the executive of the Scott Road Gurdwara, whom I met on July 19th, 2023, approximately 1 month after the murder of Mr. Nijjar. Despite their intense grief and pain, those representatives of our community, they provided their support, their patience, and their trust in the police to move this forward. Investigations in Canada are complex, and they're very, very onerous, and they take time. As such, the support from those individuals and the community at large was essential in getting it to where we are today. So the message that I want to end with is this: our community is extremely strong. It won't be intimidated, and this community will work with the police and alongside the police to hold offenders accountable. We would not be here today if that wasn't the case. Thank you.
I'll now open up to a question and answer period. Before we take the first question, we'll just have some ground rules. Please state your name and who you'd like to direct your question to. If you'd like to ask your question in Punjabi, what we'll do is have Corporal Sangha come up, repeat the question in English to whoever it's addressed to, and then she can translate the answer back into Punjabi. So we can start with whoever's first here. Yes, if you like.
Just Superintendent Muka, you were just mentioning pictures coming out, and you want some more assistance from the community. Can you expand on exactly what you're looking for now?
So anyone that had contact with these individuals during the time of the offense, which would be in June 2023 in the Surrey area, if you have any interaction with them or you observed them, we're asking that you call the IHIT tip line and relate that information to us in the hopes of building a timeline.
There are some sources that are reporting that these suspects are also linked to other murders, including that of an 11-year-old. Can you speak to that? Is there anything that you can provide us?
Unfortunately, those are different investigations that we are not currently a part of. However, we are coordinating with all agencies throughout Canada on a whole different investigations right now, but I can't speak to their investigation, unfortunately.
And I also want to ask you, of course, there was a lot of public outrage about this death. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau linked it to foreign interference. Is there any link between these suspects and the government of India, or what can you say about that?
So we are investigating if there are any ties to the government of India. However, as I said, it's an ongoing investigation, and I don't have any information to provide on that matter at this time.
What's the immigration status of these individuals?
Currently, all three individuals are non-permanent residents in Canada. However, I can't speak to their specific immigration status.
Can you detail how the game squad, how CFSEU was involved, what role they played?
They provided members and support throughout our investigation, along with intelligence.
And why were the information sheets sworn in Spruce Grove?
I would have to get back to you on that piece.
Are you looking for more suspects?
Currently, we believe that there may be others involved, and therefore there may be potential arrests or charges for others as well.
And would they be in Alberta as well, or anywhere?
I can't speak to that.
Can you speak about the partner agencies and whether they involve overseas, US or UK or Australia?
So we have been liaising with international partners, and we have collaborated with them on this investigation.
All of those or any particular?
I can't speak to exactly who.
Were the three men arrested, were they known to the police before?
They were not known to the police.
Have you been getting much cooperation from India?
I can't speak to that piece, but maybe Assistant Commissioner Tabul can.
So I could tell you that the federal policing program has collaborated and communicated with partner agencies in India, and that collaboration, that communication continues to this day.
How would you characterize that collaboration? Is it giving you everything you need? Is it?
Well, I'll be frank, I'll characterize that collaboration as rather challenging and difficult for the last several years. However, the RCMP is very committed to continuing to establish a working relationship from a law enforcement to law enforcement agency. So we're going to continue our efforts, but it's been difficult.
Sorry, you said it dated back how many years?
Several years.
And can you pinpoint when that started?
Oh, listen, over the last, I'm talking in my tenure in federal policing, it's been several years. I would argue the last 6-7 years.
En français, est-ce qu'on pourrait
Absolument, monsieur.
avoir un commentaire sur vos relations
Et nos relations entre la GRC et les agences
Inaudible
indiennes.
for the
Oui,
interpreter.
notre collaboration avec les agences d'application de la loi
Our collaboration with the
indiennes ont
different
commencé, je dirais, il y a 6 ou
agencies
7 ans,
of
durant
law
ma présence,
enforcement
évidemment,
in
à la
India
police fédérale.
began about 6 or 7 years. That is during my tenure. This is what I can say, and this relationship has been difficult for several reasons,
Mais toutefois,
and
la
I
GRC
cannot elaborate in this
est,
respect.
est
This
très,
said,
est dédié à
the
l'amélioration
RCMP
de cette
is
relation et
dedicated
l'établissement d'une relation
to
positive
improving
entre deux agences
this
d'application de la loi, la
relationship,
Gendarmerie royale
as
du
well as
Canada et
establishing
la
a
police,
productive relationship
nationale,
between
indienne.
two law enforcing agencies, that is the RCMP and the
De quelle enquête
National
parlez-vous?
Indian
Parce que
Police.
comme je l'ai dit un peu
Inaudible.
plus tôt, comme je l'ai dit un peu
What
plus tôt, il y a plusieurs enquêtes
investigation
en
are
cours. Il y a
you
l'enquête,
referring
évidemment, des
to?
homicides pour
And
laquelle
as I
nous
said
sommes
earlier
ici,
on,
pour parler des
several
résultats,
investigations are
arrêtés et accusés.
on progress. There
Et
is
comme je vous l'ai
one
dit au
for
départ, il y a aussi,
homicide. 3 people have been
l'existence
arrested
de
in this
plusieurs autres
respect.
enquêtes en cours
That
actuellement
is
qui sont très actives.
with regards to Mr. Nijjar, but there are other active investigations as well.
Again, I won't be able to speak to their immigration status, but they have been here between 3 to 5 years. Altogether, 3 to 5 years.
Just you mentioned that there's still some more people that you may be arresting and charging at a future date. What would you say to the Sikh community that might be a little bit alarmed at that idea?
What I would say is there's always the potential on these type of investigations because of how complex it is. That's why these individuals were charged with the conspiracy to commit murder. So there may be others involved. We don't ever want to say that the investigation has stopped. However, we have been partnering with all of our partner agencies to make sure that the community is safe.
And how should we think about these individuals? Are they guns for hire? Is that sort of what we should be picturing in our mind?
I think that would be, what we would want to say is throughout the court process, the evidence will show the roles that these individuals played. Then I would suggest that the community would be able to really understand the roles of what these people actually did. So I would let the evidence speak to what their assumptions for these individuals would be once they go through the court process.
They were arrested in Edmonton.
Correct. Yeah.
Are you able to say whether these three men at the time of the arrest were together or were they arrested separately?
Arrested separately.
Were American agencies involved at all, and is there an nexus with their investigation that you'll charge of last year?
That's good.
Can I answer that? Superintendent Mooker earlier made reference to our collaboration with partners, both domestic and foreign, and I can confirm that we've had constant, and we continue to have constant collaboration with agencies, again, both domestic and international, and that includes agencies in the United States.
Is there a nexus with their investigation and the charges that happened last year?
You're referring, I'm assuming, about the Mr. Pernoon, the indictment. I can't comment really any further on that and their indictment or the ongoing investigations that we have. However, they are mutual. Of these investigations are of mutual interest.
How are these arrests connected to the Edmonton shooting deaths of Harpreet Apple and his 11-year-old son, Gavin? And the question for Commissioner Tibull, because you've already had it.
So sorry, go again with your questions. The connections to?
Yeah, how are today's arrests connected to the Edmonton shooting deaths of Harpreet Apple and his 11-year-old son, Gavin?
So thank you for the question. Great question. I can't comment again, as Superintendent Mooker stated earlier, on another agency's active investigation. What I could tell you is within the federal policing program, a coordination team was born, specifically out of the RCMP here in BC, to support and collaborate with all the other domestic agencies that have a variety of investigations underway currently. So I will not comment on that specific investigation, except to tell you that we are very aggressively collaborating with all our partner agencies across the country.
Okay, and when will these three suspects, if they were arrested in Edmonton, when will they be brought back to BC for court date?
So they will be required to be here by Monday morning.
Can you unpack which partner agencies or units within the RCMP you worked with? Was INSET involved? Which divisions were involved?
There was numerous partner agencies internally and externally that were involved. INSET was one of them, definitely. But we had a whole collaboration of agencies and units that we worked with. The list would go on and on.
Which provinces?
I would say at least 3 or 4 provinces. I'm not going to speak to exactly what provinces because we do have ongoing investigations currently.
Say anything more about the each potential suspects and arrests? Are they definitely still in Canada? How many people is it?
Again, when it comes to ongoing investigations, I will not speak to that. Just to jeopardize any of those investigations, I can't speak to that at this time.
The allegations are that agents of the Indian government orchestrated Mr. Nijjar's killing. So what links do these 3 co-accused have to the Indian government?
So right now, we're investigating their ties, if any, to the Indian government. However, that's part of our ongoing investigation.
Can you confirm what date the men were arrested and provide more details about the circumstances under which they were arrested?
They were arrested this morning, all in Edmonton, and at differing times. I don't have those times.
Were they at home when they were arrested?
From my information, 2 of the individuals were at home, 1 was not.
Given the location of the conspiracy offense, it's safe to say you're alleging they planned the murder here from Edmonton?
Again, that would be part of the evidence, and I won't speak to that at this time.
It's in the charge sheet.
The conspiracy could be either planned here or in Edmonton. It could be either or. The evidence is going to show what the timeline of that conspiracy and when it occurred.
Were they members of the temple of Gurdwara here or in Edmonton or anywhere else?
I don't have that information.
So besides
What was the circumstance? Did they resist arrest? Did they cooperate?
The 3 men were taken in custody without any issues or concerns.
Would you be releasing their last name or their alias names or previous names?
We're going to be releasing their legal names.
Besides Hardeep Singh Nijjar, there has been threat to other Sikh activists as well. So do these suspects have any link to them? Have they made any collaboration, any evidence?
What I can say is that we are investigating the murder of Hardeep Nijjar, and that's what I can speak to at this point, not any other investigations or any other threats.
You kind of spoke to it before about the Sikh community, but there was a time when Indians were not flying to India because of fear of safety, and this is prominent activists. People are afraid to speak up, and they're afraid to speak their opinion. What can you say to the Sikh community on that note and ensure that they are kept safe?
Yeah, what I can say is that we would not be at this point without the bravery and courage of the Sikh community coming forward for Hardeep Nijjar's murder investigation. They were brave and courageous to come forward, and I believe that they would continue to do that for future investigations as well.
I have a question. So there have been rumors that these 3 arrested people might have connection with the Lawrence missionary gang, which is from India. So do you think that's right?
I'll turn it over to Assistant Commissioner.
So, again, I mentioned this earlier, and it speaks to several of your questions. There are several ongoing investigations currently in a lot of the matters that you are curious about. Of course, they're active investigations. For the integrity of these investigations, we will not comment any further about the nature of the offenses under investigation or who's under investigation. But to your earlier questions, there's collaboration through a variety of units. Remember, the federal policing program and the RCMP is a broad, nationwide organization. And within federal policing alone, there's also several programs that are involved. They're taking conduct of the investigations underway.
Has the Indian counsel have they contacted the requested information regarding the citizen?
So has the Indian counsel...
Have they requested information regarding the people that have been arrested?
I will not comment on any communication with consular officials or these things, no.
Can I ask about...
Kim?
Can I ask about the start of the conspiracy? According to the CSO entry, it was May 1st of 2023. Could it have gone back earlier? Are these people potentially sleeper agents that have been in the country for a number of years?
So, great question, thank you. We're not at liberty to answer that specific question, of course, because they are a matter, it is a great question, but it is a matter very much at the center of evidence and ongoing investigations.
Et de leurs accusations et aussi de leur statut d'immigration ici au Canada.
D'accord. Do you have just a list? I'll translate the list of names. Monsieur Karen Borhar, 22 ans, citoyen de l'Inde.
Karen Borhar, 22 years old.
Résident à Edmonton, en Alberta.
Citizen of
Monsieur
India,
Kamalpreet Singh, aussi
who was
également 22
residing
ans,
in
et
Edmonton,
également citoyen
Alberta.
indien.
Kamalpreet Singh, also 22, also citizen of India,
Monsieur Karenpreet
and
Singh,
resident of
âgé de
Alberta,
28 ans,
Edmonton especially,
citoyen
and Mr.
indien,
Karenpreet Singh,
et,
28 years
Edmonton,
old,
en Alberta.
also citizen of India and resident of Edmonton and Alberta. These were the 3 people
Ils sont arrivés
arrested.
entre les 3 et 5 dernières années.
They have arrived at different times in Canada between the last 3 to 5 years.
Avec la connexion de ces 3 hommes avec d'autres conspirations. Écoutez, ces 3 individus ont été arrêtés aujourd'hui et mis en accusation ou sous accusation, particulièrement avec l'enquête des homicides et les autres enquêtes qui sont en cours. Évidemment, je ne peux pas faire de commentaires
The homicide
sur
investigation,
l'implication de ces individus
and I
ou de
cannot
d'autres
comment
individus dans les
on the
enquêtes qui
other
sont en cours.
ongoing investigations with regards to the involvement of these 3 people who were arrested.
No.
And like, is it okay that they were, or is it believed that they were living in Edmonton at the time, drove to Surrey, and then drove back?
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit more how they even came to your radar? Like, I appreciate you can't go full into details, but
any sort of inkling on how they kind of came to your radar?
Yeah, I won't be able to speak to that because that directly goes into the evidence in regards to how they were identified, which I won't be able to speak to.
Does RCMP have grounds to believe that these three men were in Surrey at the time Hardeep Singh Nijjar was shot?
Yes.
Any more details on the vehicle other than it being a Corolla? Do we know anything else?
I would have to get back to you in regards to further details, but I'm sure Sergeant Parati would be able to release that information.
Are there grounds to believe that these individuals arrived on a student visa?
Again, I'm not able to speak to the immigration status.
Are these suspects related to the Bishnu gang in India?
I believe Assistant Commissioner will answer that previously. We're not able to speak to that piece.
Given that you're not allowed to share a lot of the evidence and motives that you've gathered, what is your message to the community who is probably having all kinds of speculations about what occurred right now?
My messaging to the community would be that the RCMP as a whole works together collaboratively along with all of our agencies across Canada to make sure that we provide justice to those people that are put in these positions by these offenders.
Before, in between May 1st and the date of Mr. Nijjar's killing last year, how many times were the suspects in Surrey?
I don't have that information.
You talked about the community helping a lot with investigations. How important were they in finding these men?
I would say instrumental.
Can you expand on that?
I cannot, because that would go directly to their
Are
evidence.
people in the community that still have threats against their lives walking around now? What would be the message to them?
I would say if there is a threat and they feel a threat, please contact the police and let us investigate that and feel comfort in the level of investigation that we've done, not only in this investigation but for others, leading us to us being able to charge 3 individuals for the murder of Mr. Nijjar.
Are these 3 linked to any of the duty to warn incidents in the past couple of years?
So from the related questions I see, listen, the RCMP is always extremely concerned and very focused on public safety matters, of course, and the safety, the personal safety of any and all of our citizens. So we take all of these information that come to our attention very seriously in all business lines of the RCMP, from the detachment to, of course, homicide investigations to federal policing. To your question about former duty to warns, I will repeat the same thing. Every piece of information that we receive is examined, and we have, and in many cases it has triggered in the past, as you are alluding to, obligations for duty to warns. We have a very elaborate and strict protocol when it comes to that. We don't mess around with threats that we may receive, and we engage in those duty to warns very quickly.
But are those threats negated with these 3 now arrested?
Well, listen, every time you take dangerous offenders off the street, it significantly mitigates issues of public safety, for sure.
You won't say whether they're linked to any of the other duty warrants?
I can't get into that specifically.
These 3 people were recently arrived in the country in the last 3 years. RCMP is probably looking or might have already looked at their background. For that information, have you reached out to the government of India? Or if you are going to reach out, how is that working out for RCMP?
So I could tell you that, again, as I stated earlier, we very much welcome collaboration with the government of India, and it's certainly its law enforcement agency from police to police. And I can't comment on further on previous communications with these agencies.
Where else have they resided in Canada in the 3 to 5 years they've been there?
I can only speak to them residing in Edmonton currently. However, I don't have that information.
Have the 3 suspects, since they arrived, to change their facial features or anything?
Yes.
Merci tout le monde. Thank you, everybody. J'ai manqué ma chance de lire les commentaires de M. Mooker, Superintendent Mooker. Si tu veux que je lis ses commentaires en français, on peut parler après. Thank you, everybody, for coming out today.
And you have been listening to RCMP in Surrey, British Columbia, giving us the details of the arrests that were made in Edmonton this morning. 3 suspects arrested and charged for the alleged killing of Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar in June of last year. And we have been telling you their names, and now we know a little bit more about them. They were all arrested this morning in Edmonton. They are Indian citizens of India, non-permanent residents. 22-year-old Kamalpreet Singh, 28-year-old Karen Preet Singh, and 22-year-old Karan Brar, saying that they didn't speak much about the nature of the evidence or motive, but that the matter is very much an active investigation and that there are separate and distinct investigations that are not limited to the people that were arrested today and the alleged connections to the government of India, talking about how it was very complex investigative techniques that led to these arrests, as well as help from the community, and saying that there may be others involved, there may be other residents, and they're liaising with international partners. Also talking a little bit about, as they described, a very difficult relationship with the National Indian Police. The CBC's Evan Dyer joins us now from Ottawa. So, Evan, what stood out for you from what we heard there?
Well, I think we can shed a little bit of light on a couple of those comments you just referenced. First of all, the one about multiple investigations. So the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar is, on the one hand, simply a simple criminal homicide case, but on the other hand, it's also part of a more complicated national security case about India's bigger operations in Canada. So the case that we saw wrapping up today is that homicide case. This is by the Integrated Homicide Investigative Team, which includes different municipal units of BC, including the Surrey Police and also RCMP. But there is also a separate overarching national security investigation, a federal investigation, of which the Nijjar murder is part. And of course, also, we heard a question there about our own reporting here at CBC. We have reported that there are 2 other murders, one of them a double homicide, which investigators also believe were committed by the same group of people. And those are in Edmonton and Winnipeg. So when we saw the RCMP's David Taboul, their Assistant Commissioner David Taboul, reference other investigations in other jurisdictions, I think that it's safe to say that there are ongoing homicide investigations both in Edmonton and Winnipeg that ultimately also would likely connect back to that national security investigation, that bigger national security investigation which continues. And of course, the investigators are in a tough spot because they are very limited in what they can say. They don't want to prejudice the court proceedings, the criminal proceedings that are still coming for these 3 accused, but they also don't want to prejudice the ongoing investigation, which I think they made pretty clear there could still lead to further arrests. And so they're not talking very much about those other cases that may yet come into play, and they're also not talking very much directly about Indian government involvement. We saw them asked about that a couple of times, and we saw them say, well, that's something that we can't really discuss right now. But I can tell you that investigators who I've spoken to in this investigation have very little doubt, no doubt really, about the fact that the Hardeep Singh Nijjar murder was ordered by the government of India. The RCMP and other investigators have for a long time been clear about that. There's a considerable body of human intelligence, signals intelligence, and other evidence that points to those connections. Some of the other crimes that may have been committed by this group, it's perhaps less clear whether they were directly ordered by the Indian government or simply freelanced by the same people who tended to sort of mix gang and government business, if you like, in their operations. But certainly there's no doubt in the minds of Canadian officials and investigators that the Nijjar murder traces right back to India.
And so, Evan, let's just talk a little bit about that, because they were the RCMP. They were asked there about the impact that it's had on the community in Surrey, BC. But this is political. This is global. Right. There are just so many other kind of international elements to this, right?
Right, and it was an interesting exchange where we saw RCMP Assistant Commissioner David Taboul asked about his department's, his police force's relationship with Indian police. And he said, I'm just going to be very frank. It's been difficult for many years. And I can expand a little bit on what he means by that. Sure. Basically, Indian police have for a long time asked Canadian police to go after Punjabi, particularly Punjabi figures in Canada, who they accuse of either Khalistani extremism or criminal affiliations. But Canadian police have been very frustrated at the quality of evidence that the Indians have provided to back up some of those requests. So India will issue an Interpol Red Notice, which pretty much any country can request. There is no real standard of evidence that's required to get an Interpol Red Notice issued. Once that's done, then they come to Canada and they start appealing for individual X or Y to be sent back to India or to be investigated or in some way for their activities to be curtailed. But the evidence that they provide in some cases is little more than newspaper clippings from the Indian media. And many of those newspaper clippings, of course, are simply referencing comments fed to the Indian media by those very same agencies that are seeking extradition or other interventions, other assistance from Canadian police. So Canadian police have had a difficult time getting reliable information, non-political information, credible criminal information from the government of India to back up these requests. And yet, of course, that has not stopped the government of India from accusing Canada very publicly, and we've seen this from Foreign Minister Jaishankar and others, accusing Canada of being a safe haven, of not being willing to help India to confront the national security and crime problems supposedly posed by people in Canada. There is recognition among Canadian law enforcement that there are people in Canada connected particularly to the world of organized crime in Punjab and in Haryana states who have been operating extortion rings, both in this country and back in India. There is a recognition that these groups have gone international. They're not only here, they're also in the United States and in other countries. But they would certainly push back on the notion that Canada has been the problem in this relationship and that Indian officials have presented Canada with valid information which the Canadians then failed to proceed on.
And Evan, just before I let you go, I think we should talk about, it's been quite a contrast right until from when the Prime Minister got up in the House of Commons and made these accusations about the Indian government being involved in all this, and then some of the reaction we heard from the Public Safety Minister today, because presumably arrests have been made, and now this is all kind of going through a very official court process, right?
That's right. I mean, every indication that I've seen and everything that I've heard from people involved with this investigation suggests that the government has taken a pretty hands-off approach. There has been no attempt by the Canadian government to try to steer or even really seek constant updates on the progress of this information. There is, of course, a separation between government and police in this country, and it's been respected, to the best of my understanding, in this case pretty scrupulously. So this has been a clean and conventional criminal investigation. I should say also that one other thing is that the homicide itself is not the most complicated element of this case. That was not really the most challenging element for investigators. Solving the Nijjar homicide was, obviously, there are difficulties that they were confronted with. The fact that, as we just heard, the alleged killers don't really have a history in Canada. They're not people who are known to police. They're foreign citizens, recent arrivals in this country. And yet, conventional homicide techniques were able to get onto their trail pretty fast. What has complicated this case so much more are all of the diplomatic complications, the governmental angle to it. It's the bigger picture and the international connections, the connections to the plot in the United States, which has been alleged in that country against another Sikh activist who was a very close collaborator with Hardeep Singh Nijjar and a friend of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, Gurwara Singh Panun. So that's what's really complicated this case, and probably, those considerations will continue to be a kind of an impediment to this investigation, or a complicating factor in this investigation, because now that the triggermen, the alleged triggermen, are in custody, the hit squad is sort of just the base of a pyramid here, because this is being charged as a conspiracy, and there's no suggestion that the only conspirators involved are the three people we saw charged today. And so the next stage will be moving up a kind of a pyramid or a chain of command in this investigation. And of course, the closer it gets, the higher it moves up the chain of command, the more fraught it becomes politically in terms of Canada's relationships with India.
So many aspects and angles to this important story. Appreciate your reporting on this today, Evan. The CBC's Evan Dyer live in Ottawa.
Thanks.
Rishi Gill was watching that briefing along with us. He is a criminal defense lawyer in Vancouver and a former Crown counsel. And Rishi, I appreciate you taking the time. I mean, this is really quite a moment. What is your main takeaway from what we heard there from RCMP?
Well, I would say, and thanks for having me, Andrew, but I would say that Evan captured it very well. I think he's got all the details exactly correct. I have one small disagreement with his interpretation just on the conspiracy aspect, but basically I think the main point I would take out of that is the striking fact, I thought that's the first thing I picked up, is when the officer was asked about the relations with the Indian police, and his response was remarkable to me as just an observer or somebody in the legal profession. That type of language is a very clear signal of displeasure. He could have just said nothing and said, well, you know, they are what they are. But to go that far, he's making a statement by not making a statement, I suppose.
To say very difficult.
That's what makes it.
He said very difficult.
That is you mean that is as close to throwing up your hands in exasperation as you could possibly get in this type of environment when you've got all the media watching this. It's an internationally watched case. So yes, that was a big moment for me.
And we know that the suspects in this case, they're all young men, reportedly here, or at least two of them were here on student visas, all citizens of India, all coming into Canada in the last 3 to 5 years. What does that suggest to you?
A few things. Look, not knowing how this is playing out, and I think one thing we have to emphasize here is, as Evan was mentioning, there's a specific murder investigation. It's just is a murder case, and there's this other dimension, which is massive, which is the political, international, and national security dimension. But I would say this, if there's a foreign jurisdiction involved, whether it's India or some other jurisdiction, who knows, the fact that students of this capacity are the suspects, you know, we don't know if they're guilty or not, but if they did do it, the fact that it's a foreign student who's here on that type of visa is quite telling. If it was a straight up murder for other reasons, there's no way that you'd see this type of person involved. It would be a gangland killing. It would be people who are at the very least would be permanent residents, some sort of affiliation. But if you're coming here on a visa, as a student visa, it's so atypical to be charged with that type of offense. I've never seen it. The types of calls that, let's say, my office may get when it's a visa case, somebody on a student visa of some sort, it's minor offenses, assault. It may be a shoplifting. It is so trivial. And I think most criminal lawyers would tell you the same thing. If it's a murder case and you've got student visa individuals here, that's telling. And whoever was, if it is somebody that's cooking this up, whoever made that decision to get students involved is not the brightest bulb, because the way one would think they do it is get people in the gang community to do that. At least you could cover tracks off better.
And I know that you're a lawyer and you're not a politician, but you kind of talked a little bit about the political dimensions of all of this, right? I mean, it's quite something. What was your take on all of that?
Well, it's going to make it really complicated because these people have rights under whether they're citizens or not. We have a charter and we have a very robust judicial system, and we have we have one of the best judicial systems and legal systems in the world, quite frankly, and they'll get the full benefit of that. But then you do have this other extraordinary dimension of this international aspect. And the fact that a compatriot of Mr. Nijjar in the States, who I think was a U.S. citizen, you'll have to check that, but I understand they were a U.S. citizen, was also killed, which brings the States into this. So it's not just Canada being maybe pushed around in a way that's completely inappropriate. Now you've got the biggest power in the world involved. With one of their, people under their protection. And then you've got India, which is one of the emerging powers in the world. It's always been a state that's had a lot of sway in some ways, but now it's becoming a very, very notable power with a government that's increasingly different from the governments in the past in India. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And but as Evan said, these people do have specific rights, and those rights have to be protected. It's going to be a mess, quite frankly, depending on how the evidence plays out, because the lawyers involved in this case, whoever they may be, I'm sure they'll be very good ones, defending these people, are going to be looking at all different angles here. And how far does the government want to get into the national security issues, and how much do the lawyers wish to pursue and seeing if there is any national security issues. It'll be a very, very interesting case. It's a run-of-the-mill case in some ways as a murder case, as Evan said. It is not going to be a run-of-the-mill case in how it's run generally because of the political dimension. It'll be fascinating.
Okay, so it'll be fascinating. It'll be a mess. Can you take us through the next stage of all of this?
The next stage, it's a murder case, and so they have to be dealt with by the Supreme Courts, the superior courts. You can't have any other way when it's a murder case. They will have to, if they're going to deal with bail, that would have to be dealt with in superior courts. They'll go into provincial court, which will just be a day-to-day appearance where they'll have to get scheduled. Lawyers will have to be either appointed through the legal aid system, or if they can afford private counsel, whatever that may be. We'll have to see what their instructions will be through the lawyers' utterances in court. And then there'll be proceedings for disclosure. It's going to be a big case. And I want to just, if I could, just for a minute, when Evan was talking about the conspiracy aspect, that doesn't necessarily mean, and I'm not criticizing what he was saying or disagreeing with it, but just because it's a conspiracy doesn't mean it would have to go higher than these three individuals. You could have a conspiracy with just these three. They could together conspire. Now, if there's somebody else up there, that's not foreclosed, but it doesn't mean that there's more to it. It could just be these three individuals all conspired to commit the murder, and that could be the conspiracy, but it could be something else.
Rishi, again, appreciate you very much taking the time. Thank you. Criminal defense lawyer Rishi Gill in Vancouver.
Thank you.